The key slid into the lock, a familiar, comforting sound I'd heard tens of thousands of times over 20 years. It was the sound of home, of safety, of the life I had so carefully built. But on that Saturday afternoon, the sound wasn't a comfort. It was the click of a trigger on a gun pointed directly at my heart. I pushed the door open, a wide, conspiratorial grin on my face, my finger pressed to my lips to quiet my 2 children behind me. We were supposed to be 200 miles away, but a sick child had brought us home early, and I thought, what a wonderful surprise for their father. The surprise, however, was all mine. In my living room, on the sofa where my children opened their Christmas presents, sat my husband, Mark. And curled against his side was a woman who was not me. On the floor, playing with my son's Legos, was a little boy with Mark's exact shade of curly brown hair. The boy looked up, his green eyes a perfect mirror of my husband's, and said 5 words that detonated my entire world. "Daddy, can I have some juice?" Before I tell you how I picked up the shattered pieces of that explosion and used them to build a fortress, I need you to do me a favor. If you've ever felt that gut-wrenching twist of suspicion, if you've ever wondered if you were just being paranoid, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell because you need to hear how this ends, and drop a comment below letting me know where in the world you're watching from. You're going to need this community because what I'm about to tell you is a testament to the fact that you can survive the unthinkable. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for every last detail. To understand the depth of the devastation, you have to understand the perfection of the illusion. My name is Sarah, and for 20 years, I was Mrs. Mark Peterson, a title I wore with immense pride. We were the couple everyone pointed to as proof that true love existed. We met in a ridiculously cliché way, a literature class in college, arguing over the symbolism in The Great Gatsby. He was charming, intelligent, and had a smile that could disarm armies. I was ambitious, creative, and studying to be an architect. He pursued me with a single-minded focus that was both flattering and intoxicating. Our courtship was a whirlwind of handwritten letters, late-night talks, and spontaneous road trips. He proposed a year later on a trip to Italy under a blanket of stars on the Amalfi Coast, with a ring he'd designed himself. He said he wanted to build a life with me that was as beautiful and timeless as the architecture surrounding us. And I believed him. Our wedding was a perfect, sun-drenched affair. I walked down the aisle toward a man whose eyes were filled with tears, a man who promised to love and cherish me for all of eternity. And for many years, it felt like he was keeping that promise. We bought a beautiful 2-story colonial in a leafy suburb, the kind of place with a tire swing in the front yard and neighbors who brought over casseroles when you were sick. I put my own architectural career on hold to design our home, pouring all my creativity into creating the perfect nest for our family. Every room was a testament to our life together. The kitchen where we baked cookies with our son, Liam. The living room where we snuggled for movie nights with our daughter, Chloe. The master bedroom that was supposed to be our sanctuary. When Mark's career in international sales took off, it required him to travel extensively. We made a decision together, as a team. One of us needed to be the constant, the anchor for the kids. I volunteered without a second thought. I shelved my blueprints and my ambitions, trading them for school runs, PTA meetings, and soccer practice. I became the CEO of the Peterson household, and I ran it with precision and love. I managed the finances, the schedules, the home, the emotional well-being of our children. I created a seamless, beautiful life for him to come home to after his long, grueling trips. I didn't see it as a sacrifice. I saw it as an investment in our shared dream. Liam, our thoughtful, brilliant 10-year-old, and Chloe, our bubbly, artistic 7-year-old, were my world. Seeing them thrive, seeing the adoration in their eyes when their father walked through the door after a trip, felt like the greatest accomplishment of my life. To the outside world, we were flawless. Our Christmas cards were the ones other families envied. At neighborhood barbecues, women would pull me aside and ask, "What's your secret? You and Mark are just so perfect." My parents worshipped him. They saw him as the provider, the protector, the man who had given their daughter a fairy tale life. My friends, especially my best friend Jessica, would often joke that Mark set an impossibly high bar for other husbands. We were goals. We were the benchmark. I was so insulated by this public perception, so wrapped up in the beautiful tapestry I thought we were weaving together, that I failed to see the threads he was pulling, one by one, until the entire thing was ready to unravel. I had given up my financial independence, my career, and in many ways, my own identity, to become a part of this perfect unit. I was Sarah Peterson, Mark's wife, Liam and Chloe's mom, and I believed with every fiber of my being that it was enough. I had no idea that while I was building our home, he was busy building another one with another woman, brick by treacherous brick. Looking back now, the red flags were not just there. They were giant crimson banners flapping in a hurricane, and I was the fool standing in the rain, telling myself it was just a light drizzle. The change was insidious, a slow erosion of the man I thought I knew. It started about 3 years ago. His business trips, which had always been a staple of our life, began to change in character. The destinations became less varied. It was always Chicago. "They're opening a new Midwest hub," he'd explain, his voice weary over the phone. "They've put me in charge of the whole launch. It's a ton of pressure, honey." The trips grew longer, more frequent. Sometimes he'd be gone for a week, come home for 3 days, and then have to fly right back out for another 4. When he was home, he was a ghost. He was physically present, but his mind was elsewhere. The light in his eyes, the one that used to spark when he saw me, was gone. It was replaced by a perpetual exhaustion. "You're working too hard, Mark," I'd say, rubbing his shoulders as he stared blankly at the TV. "It's for us, Sarah," he'd murmur, patting my hand dismissively. "It's all for you and the kids. This promotion will set us up for life." And I, the ever-supportive wife, would accept that. I'd make his favorite meals, keep the kids quiet so he could rest, and defend his absences to our friends and family. I told myself that his distance was the price of his success, the cost of the beautiful life he was providing. I chose to see it as a sacrifice he was making for us, not a sign he was pulling away. Then came the phone. For 15 years, his phone had been an open book. It lay on the kitchen counter, on the nightstand, password-free. Suddenly, it had a 6-digit passcode. When I asked him about it, he was smooth, his excuse perfectly plausible. "New company policy?" he said, not looking up from his screen. "Security protocols for sensitive client data. We all have to have them now." It made sense, so I let it go. But his behavior with the phone became increasingly furtive. It was always in his pocket or face down on the table. He started taking calls outside on the patio, his back to the kitchen window, his voice a low, urgent hum. Once, I walked out to ask him a question, and he flinched, ending the call abruptly. "Sorry, honey, that was head office. Really confidential stuff." Again, I swallowed my flicker of doubt. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? This was Mark, the man who cried at our wedding, the man who held my hand for 12 straight hours when I was in labor with Liam. My best friend Jessica was the only one who dared to question the narrative. She had a healthy dose of cynicism that I'd always lacked. We were having coffee one afternoon while the kids were at school. "I don't know, Sarah," she said, stirring her latte and avoiding my eyes. "It's just a lot of trips to Chicago, and he seems so checked out when he's here." My defenses immediately shot up. "Jess, you have no idea the pressure he's under. He's building an entire division from the ground up. Of course he's stressed and tired. I'd be more worried if he wasn't." "I'm just saying," she pressed gently. "It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to want more of his attention." "And I will," I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Once this project is over. He's doing this for his family. For me. I'm not going to add to his stress by being a needy, suspicious wife." I felt a pang of guilt for snapping at her, but I was really defending my own reality. Admitting she might have a point would mean admitting there was a crack in my perfect world, and I wasn't ready for that. I defended him so fiercely because I was terrified of what I might find if I stopped. The financial irregularities were easier to explain away. I'd always managed our joint accounts, but he opened a new credit card in his name only. I found the statement by accident when it was delivered to our house instead of his office P.O. box. It was full of charges I didn't recognize. Expensive dinners in Chicago on nights I thought he was eating room service. Charges from a high-end children's boutique. A recurring monthly payment to a daycare center. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared at the paper. I confronted him that night, my hands shaking. He didn't even blink. He looked at me with those earnest green eyes, the ones that had always been my undoing, and he smiled a tired, patient smile. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you had to see that. I should have told you. It's my new corporate card. The dinners are for client entertainment. You know how it is. You have to wine and dine them. The boutique? I bought a gift for our London affiliate's new baby. And the daycare payment, that's a new corporate perk. The company subsidizes childcare for a few underprivileged families in the Chicago area as a community outreach program. I'm heading up the initiative." He had an answer for everything. A perfect, logical, unimpeachable answer. And what was I supposed to say? That I didn't believe him? That he was a liar? To do so would be to call our entire 20-year history a lie. He was gaslighting me, but I didn't have the language for it then. I just felt a wave of relief, followed by a hot flush of shame for doubting him. He was a good man, a charitable man, a hard-working man. And I was becoming the crazy, jealous wife from a bad TV movie. I apologized for snooping, for my lack of trust. He held me close and whispered, "It's okay. I know it's been hard with me being gone so much. I promise, it'll all be worth it soon." I clung to him, breathing in the scent of his cologne, and pushed every last doubt down into the dark recesses of my mind. I chose to believe in the illusion, because the truth was a possibility too terrifying to even contemplate. The weekend it all fell apart was supposed to be a special one, a long overdue trip to visit my sister Kate, 2 states away. Just me and the kids. Mark was, predictably, scheduled for another last-minute trip to Chicago. "I'm so sorry to miss the weekend, babe," he'd said, kissing me goodbye at the door on Friday morning. "Close this big deal, and I'll make it up to you, I promise. We'll take that trip to Hawaii we've been talking about." He looked tired but handsome in his travel suit, and my heart ached with a familiar mix of pride and loneliness. We were barely an hour into our 4-hour drive when Chloe, my 7-year-old, started complaining about a stomachache. Within 30 minutes, she was pale and feverish, and I had to pull over at a rest stop as she got sick. There was no way we could continue. I called Kate to cancel, my disappointment palpable. She understood, of course. After getting Chloe cleaned up and settled in the back seat with a blanket and a bottle of water, I turned the car around. Liam was disappointed, but understood his sister was sick. As we drove, a new idea sparked. Mark's flight wasn't until late that afternoon. What if we went home and surprised him? The kids loved surprising their dad. The thought of seeing his face light up when we walked in, unexpected, was enough to lift my spirits. It felt like a little gift from the universe, a chance to steal back a few precious hours of family time. We'd have the whole afternoon together before he had to leave. We pulled into our driveway around 1 o'clock. I noticed an unfamiliar blue sedan parked on the street a few houses down, but I didn't think anything of it. I parked in the garage, and the kids and I tiptoed to the front door, our faces alight with playful mischief. "Okay, you guys," I whispered, my finger to my lips. "On the count of 3, we're all going to yell, 'Surprise!' Be as quiet as mice until then." They giggled, their earlier disappointment forgotten. I slid my key into the lock. That was the moment, the click, the sound that separated my life into a before and an after. I pushed the door open into the cool, silent air of our home. It was strangely quiet. Mark's briefcase was by the door, but there was no sound of him on a work call. No TV on in the background. "Daddy must be taking a nap," Liam whispered. "Let's go see," I whispered back, leading them through the foyer. As we neared the living room, I heard a faint noise. It was the theme song to a children's cartoon, one I didn't recognize. My brow furrowed. That was odd. I held up a hand to halt the kids behind me and crept to the edge of the doorway, peering around the frame, ready to launch our surprise attack. But the scene in my living room stopped the air in my lungs. My blood didn't just run cold, it turned to ice, freezing me in place. There was Mark on our cream-colored linen sofa. He wasn't alone. A woman with long, dark hair was nestled against his chest, her head on his shoulder, his arm draped possessively around her. She was wearing one of my favorite cashmere throws. They were watching the cartoon on the television. And on our Persian rug, in the middle of a sprawling city built from Liam's Lego collection, sat a small boy. He couldn't have been more than 4 years old. He had a mop of unruly brown curls and a smattering of freckles across his nose. He was the spitting image of Mark. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It was like a surrealist painting. These people did not belong in my house, on my sofa, with my son's toys. It was a violation, a complete tear in the fabric of reality. I must be dreaming. This had to be a nightmare. Then, the little boy looked up from his Legos, his face breaking into a bright, innocent smile. He looked directly at the man I had married, the father of my children, and his small voice, clear as a bell in the quiet room, echoed in a way that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Daddy," he said, "can I have some juice?" Mark's face, which had been soft and relaxed, transformed. He beamed at the little boy with a look of pure, unadulterated love. It was a look I recognized. It was the look he used to give me. It was the look he gave Liam and Chloe when they were small. It was a look I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Of course, little man," Mark said, his voice thick with affection. He started to detangle himself from the woman. The world tilted on its axis. The keys, still clutched in my hand, slipped from my nerveless fingers. They hit the hardwood floor of the foyer with a sharp metallic clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the stillness. 3 heads whipped around in my direction. The woman's eyes widened in confusion and then dawning horror. The little boy looked curious. But Mark's face went through 100 emotions in a single second. Shock, disbelief, abject terror. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty gray mask. He looked at me, standing in the doorway with my 2 children peeking out from behind my legs, and it was as if he had seen a ghost. In that moment, I realized that to him, in this other life he was living, maybe I was supposed to be one. I don't remember making a conscious decision to move. My body acted on pure, primal instinct, the way a mother animal protects her young from a predator. My only thought was, get my children away from this. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I simply put my hands on Liam's and Chloe's shoulders, turned them around, and marched them back out the front door, away from the scene that had just irrevocably broken our family. Chloe was crying, confused by the sudden tension. Liam was silent, his 10-year-old mind already trying to piece together the horrifying puzzle he had just witnessed. I buckled them into their car seats, my hands shaking so violently I could barely operate the clasps. I got into the driver's seat and just drove. I had no destination. I just needed to put distance between us and that house, that man, that lie. I drove for what felt like hours, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my gaze fixed on the road ahead, seeing nothing. The sounds in the car were a symphony of my personal hell. Chloe's soft sobs, Liam's heavy silence, and the frantic looping questions in my own head. Who was she? Who was that little boy? Daddy? He called him Daddy. How long? How could he? Finally, I found myself in the deserted parking lot of a closed-down strip mall. I pulled into a space, put the car in park, and the dam broke. A sound tore from my throat, a raw, wounded noise I didn't recognize as my own. I dropped my head to the steering wheel and sobbed. I cried for the 20 years I had invested, for the career I had given up, for the trust I had so freely given. I cried for my children, whose innocence had just been stolen from them. I cried for the woman I used to be just an hour ago, the happy, naive, trusting woman who believed she had a perfect life. She was gone. She had died in that living room, and I was left to mourn her. I cried until I had no tears left, until my body was just a hollow, aching shell. And then, in the silence that followed, something new began to stir in the pit of my stomach. It started as a flicker, and then grew into a roaring flame. It was rage, a cold, clear, clarifying rage. The grief was still there, a massive wound in my chest. But the rage was a fire that cauterized it. He would not destroy me. He would not destroy my children. He had underestimated me. He had counted on me being the meek, supportive wife who would either fall apart or quietly accept his terms. He had no idea who he had just unleashed. The weak woman who had spent years rationalizing his behavior died in that parking lot. In her place, a warrior was born. I wiped my face, looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, at the red-rimmed, swollen eyes staring back at me, and I made a promise. I would not be a victim in this story. I would be the victor. The first call I made was not to my sister or my parents. It was to my friend, Jessica. I sat in that desolate parking lot, the engine off, the silence amplifying my ragged breathing. I swallowed my pride, the bitter taste of my own foolishness coating my tongue. I dialed her number. "Sarah, I thought you were on the road to Kate's. Is everything okay?" Her voice was warm, concerned, and it nearly broke me all over again. "You were right," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Jess, you were right about everything." There was a pause on the other end. No, I told you so. No hint of vindication. Just pure, unwavering friendship. "Where are you?" she asked, her tone shifting from concerned friend to crisis manager. "Tell me where you are right now." I gave her my location. "Don't go anywhere," she said. "Don't call him. Don't answer if he calls. I'm on my way. While I waited, I made my second call. I didn't look for a local family lawyer. I searched for the most feared, most relentless, most successful divorce attorney in the city. Her name was Evelyn Reed, and her online reviews described her as a shark in a designer suit and a legal nightmare for the opposing side. She was exactly what I needed. Her office was closed, but her website listed an emergency contact number. I dialed it, fully expecting an answering service, but a crisp, no-nonsense voice answered on the second ring. Evelyn Reed! I stumbled through my story, the words tumbling out in a chaotic, grief-stricken torrent. I told her about the other woman, the little boy, the years of trips to Chicago. I expected her to cut me off, to tell me to call back during business hours. Instead, she listened intently, interrupting only to ask sharp, clarifying questions. How old is the boy? Did you see any documents? Do you have access to your financial records? When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Mrs. Peterson? She said, her voice devoid of pity, but filled with a steely resolve. Go home. When your husband gets there, you will tell him you overreacted, that you were in shock. But you are willing to go to counseling to work through this. Do not accuse him further. Do not mention the child. You will play the part of the wounded but willing wife. Can you do that? I don't know, I stammered. The thought of looking at him, of pretending, made me feel sick. You have to, she said firmly. He is arrogant. He believes he can control the narrative. We are going to use his arrogance against him. He will get complacent while we get prepared. Go home, play the part, and gather every financial document you can find. Bank statements, tax returns, credit card bills, investment portfolios. My office will be in touch on Monday morning to schedule an appointment. We are going to burn him to the ground, legally speaking. Hanging up, I felt a sliver of control for the first time all day. I had a plan. I had an ally. Just then, Jessica's car pulled into the parking lot. She got out and ran to my window. When she saw my face, she didn't say a word. She just opened my door and pulled me into a hug. I leaned against her, and for a moment, I let myself be weak. She bundled the kids, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep, into her car, and drove us all to her house. That night, I didn't sleep. Jessica and I sat at her kitchen table until dawn, fueled by coffee and righteous anger, and we laid the groundwork for my new life. The next few weeks were the hardest of my entire life. I followed Evelyn Reed's instructions to the letter. I went back to my house, our house, and when Mark finally came slinking home late that night, looking haggard and terrified, I played my part. I cried. I told him I was devastated, but that I couldn't throw away 20 years. I told him I would consider marriage counseling if he ended the affair immediately. The relief on his face was nauseating. He thought he had dodged a bullet. He thought I only knew about the woman, not the child, not the entire secret family. He launched into a well-rehearsed speech about loneliness on the road, about making a terrible mistake, about how I was the only one he ever truly loved. It was a masterful performance. The old Sarah would have believed every word. The new Sarah saw him for what he was, a snake, charming his way out of the trap. He promised he would end it. He became sickeningly attentive, buying me flowers, calling me constantly. He was playing his part, too, thinking he was lulling me into forgiveness while I was lulling him into a false sense of security. While he was on his next business trip, a trip I knew was to the home of his other family, my investigation began in earnest. Guided by Evelyn and assisted by Jessica, I became a detective in my own life. Evelyn had connected me with a forensic accountant named Martin, a quiet, meticulous man who looked more like a librarian than a financial bloodhound. I gave him the mountain of paperwork I had collected. The first bombshell dropped a week later. Martin called me into his office. He had uncovered a series of shell corporations and hidden bank accounts. For the past 5 years, Mark had been systematically siphoning money from his salary and our joint investments. He had diverted hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that wasn't the worst part. Martin had also found a mortgage application for a 4-bedroom house in a town called Northwood, just 45 minutes away. Not Chicago. He had never been going to Chicago. He had been living a full-blown second life less than an hour from our home. The application was in his name, and the name of one Amelia Jensen. The mortgage was approved 5 years ago. My blood ran cold. 5 years. That little boy, he wasn't 4, he was 5. He was born at the very beginning of this lie. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated, long-term deception. The final piece of the puzzle was the most terrifying. I took the address from the mortgage application. One afternoon, while the kids were at school and Mark was supposedly in a meeting in Northwood, I drove there. The house was a mirror image of our own, a lovely colonial on a tree-lined street. A little red tricycle was overturned on the lawn. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard, I thought it would break through. What was I doing here? What did I hope to accomplish? I almost turned back, but Evelyn's words echoed in my head. Knowledge is power, Sarah. I needed to know. I parked down the street and I waited. An hour later, a woman came out to get the mail. It was her, the woman from my sofa. She looked different in the daylight. She looked normal, like any other suburban mom. She looked tired. As I watched her, another car pulled up. Not Mark's. A woman got out and handed a file to Amelia. They spoke for a few moments, and I saw Amelia's face crumble. She started to cry. The other woman hugged her. Driven by an impulse I still don't understand, I got out of my car. I walked up the driveway. Amelia looked up, her eyes red and swollen. When she saw me, her expression shifted from sadness to pure confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice wary. My own voice was shaking. "My name is Sarah Peterson. I'm Mark's wife." The color drained from her face. She stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. "No," she whispered. That's not possible. His wife died. Sarah, she died in a car accident 5 years ago." And there it was, the final, most monstrous piece of his deception. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had erased me. He had killed me off so he could play the part of a grieving widower for this unsuspecting woman. The file she was holding? It was from a private investigator. She had started to have her own suspicions. The pieces were clicking into place for both of us at the same time. We weren't enemies. We were 2 women standing in the wreckage of the same man's lies. I showed her a photo on my phone, a recent one of me, Mark, Liam, and Chloe at the beach. She stared at it, her face a mask of horror and betrayal, and then she looked at me, her eyes filled with a shared pain. "Come inside," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You and I have a lot to talk about." The trap was set for a Tuesday morning. Evelyn Reed had arranged what she called a 4-way mediation meeting at her opulent downtown office. Mark, his lawyer, Evelyn, and me. Mark strode in looking confident, even a little smug. He was dressed in his most expensive suit, the picture of contrition and power. He believed this was the final step. He thought he'd come in, offer a generous settlement for his indiscretion, and I, the financially dependent housewife, would gratefully accept it and go away quietly. He thought he was in complete control. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. We sat across a massive mahogany table. Mark started, his voice smooth and practiced. "Sarah?" he began, reaching a hand across the table toward me, which I ignored. "I know I've caused you unimaginable pain. I made a terrible, terrible mistake, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust." His lawyer, a slick man with a reptilian smile, nodded along approvingly. I let him finish his entire pathetic speech. I let him talk about how the affair with that woman was over, how it meant nothing, how our family was the only thing that mattered. I met his gaze, my face a blank canvas, and I watched him lie. The man I had loved for 20 years was gone. In his place was a stranger, a performer. When he was done, a heavy silence filled the room. Evelyn cleared her throat. "Thank you for that, Mark," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "Now, let's discuss the reality of the situation." She slid a thick bound document across the table. "This is a full report from a forensic accountant detailing the 5 shell corporations you've established and the $1.2 million you have illegally diverted from marital assets over the past 5 years. We've already frozen those accounts, by the way." Mark's confident smirk vanished. He paled, snatching the document and flipping through it, his eyes wide with panic. His lawyer's smile also disappeared, replaced by a look of alarm. "Furthermore," Evelyn continued, sliding a second folder across the table, "this contains the deed to your second home in Northwood, the one you purchased with your mistress, Miss Amelia Jensen. It also contains copies of your son Ethan's birth certificate, listing you as the father, and school enrollment forms where you declared yourself a widower." Mark looked like he'd been physically struck. He started to stammer. This is an invasion of privacy. You can't." "Oh, we can," Evelyn cut in, her voice sharp as a razor. "And we have. You see, Mark, Sarah isn't the only client of mine you should be concerned about today." On cue, a side door to the conference room opened, and in walked Amelia Jensen. She looked strong, composed, her eyes burning with a cold fire. She was not a victim today. She was a witness. Mark stopped breathing. He stared at her, then at me, his mind clearly imploding as he tried to comprehend how his 2 separate worlds had just collided with the force of a supernova in this sterile conference room. He looked like a cornered animal. The charming facade was gone, ripped away to reveal the pathetic, terrified liar underneath. "Hello, Mark," Amelia said, her voice steady and clear. "You told me Sarah died in a car crash. You told me you were a single father struggling to raise 2 children on your own. You proposed to me last Christmas with a ring you told me was your grandmother's." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. "I found out from Sarah that it was the ring she had to sell to help pay for your MBA 20 years ago. That was the final blow." Mark made a choking sound. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked from me to Amelia, the 2 women he had so profoundly betrayed, now united against him. His mask didn't just slip, it shattered. He slumped in his chair, a broken, exposed man. The game was over. We had won. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Justice, it turns out, can be as methodical and devastating as betrayal. Faced with irrefutable evidence of financial fraud, bigamy in spirit if not in law, and a level of deceit that shocked even the seasoned lawyers, Mark had no cards left to play. His legal counsel, seeing the mountain of evidence and the united front of 2 women represented by Evelyn Reed, advised him to settle on every single count. The divorce decree was a masterpiece of legal retribution. I was awarded the family home, full and sole custody of Liam and Chloe, and a financial settlement that included 70% of all marital assets, including the $1.2 million he had hidden away. The court also granted me lifetime alimony citing his extreme and egregious marital misconduct. He was ruined financially, but that was just the beginning. Amelia filed a separate civil suit against him for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and misrepresentation. She won. The court ordered him to pay a substantial settlement and established a child support arrangement for their son, Ethan, based on his true, pre-fraud income. He would be paying for his lies for the rest of his life. Professionally, he was annihilated. Evelyn Reed's office sent a discreet but detailed summary of the court findings to the board of directors at his company. He was fired within the week for gross misconduct and misuse of company resources. The charming, high-flying executive was now an unemployed pariah. His family, who had always viewed me as a quiet, simple woman and him as their golden boy, were horrified when I laid out the truth for them, complete with documentation. They disowned him. He lost his wife, his other family, his job, his money, and his reputation in the span of a few months. He was left with nothing but the consequences of his own choices. A year later, life is unrecognizable in the most beautiful way. I sold that house. It was a beautiful structure, but the foundation was rotten with lies. I couldn't heal there. With the money from the sale and the settlement, I bought a smaller, brighter home for myself and the kids in a new neighborhood. It's filled with light and laughter, and for the first time in years, it feels like a true sanctuary. The most important change, however, happened within me. The rage that had fueled me through the fight eventually subsided, leaving behind a quiet strength I never knew I possessed. I took a portion of my settlement and went back to school to get my architectural license recertified. 6 months ago, I opened my own boutique firm, Phoenix Design, specializing in sustainable and restorative architecture. It's a small operation, but it's mine. I'm creating, building, and supporting myself and my children with my own 2 hands and my own mind. The feeling of cashing that first check with my company's name on it was more satisfying than any luxury Mark ever bought me. Liam and Chloe are thriving. They are in therapy, and we talk openly and honestly. They are resilient, incredible little humans. They see a mother who is happy, strong, and present. They see a woman who faced the worst kind of storm and learned how to build a lifeboat instead of drowning. In a strange twist of fate, Amelia and I have forged a tentative, supportive friendship. We are bonded by a unique trauma. We meet for coffee sometimes. Our sons, Liam and Ethan, who are half-brothers, have met. It was awkward at first, but now they are slowly building a connection. We are determined that the sins of the father will not be visited upon the children. We are 2 single mothers, doing our best to raise good men, ensuring they learn the lessons their own father so spectacularly failed to grasp. We are not defined by his betrayal, we are defined by our survival. So, here is what I want you to take away from my story. If you are sitting here today, watching this, and there is a little voice in the back of your head telling you that something is wrong, please, I am begging you, listen to it. Your intuition is your most powerful weapon. Do not let anyone, not even the person you love most in the world, convince you that you are crazy, paranoid, or needy for questioning things that don't add up. The red flags are not there to be ignored. They are warnings designed to save you. And if you find yourself in the middle of the storm, if your world has been shattered by a betrayal you never saw coming, I want you to hear me. This is not the end. It is the beginning. The pain you feel is real, and it is valid, but it does not have to be a life sentence. You are so much stronger than you know. The person who betrayed you saw you as weak, as someone they could control and manipulate. Your greatest revenge is not in hating them, it's in proving them wrong. It's in building a life so beautiful, so successful, and so joyful that their absence is a blessing, not a curse. Your worth was never determined by their loyalty, and it is not diminished by their betrayal. You were whole before them, and you will be whole after them. You can, and you will, survive this. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you for holding this space with me. If any part of this resonated with you, please hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The greatest comfort in these dark times is knowing you are not alone, so please drop a comment below and share a piece of your own story if you feel comfortable. We are a community here, and we lift each other up. Stay strong, stay blessed, and always remember, the truth has a funny way of coming out, and your new life is waiting for you on the other side of the fire. Always.